ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Also, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so that way you don't miss out on any videos. We are getting really close to 100,000 subscribers. Go ahead, hook a brother up, hit those buttons. Also, while you're hitting buttons, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps the channel out, helps us find more viewers like yourself. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Uncanny X-Men #2, written by Gail Simone, with art by David Marquez, colors by Matthew Wilson, and letters by Clayton Cowles. But before we go any further, there is a huge announcement coming from Global Comics. Today's sponsor, Global Comics, has done an amazing job with bringing digital comics to the forefront, filling in the vacuum for digital comics, bringing in publishers like Image Comics, as well as Boom Studios and Dynamite, Vault and Mad Cave, and so many others. And a new publisher has entered the arena, and that is Dark Horse Comics. We're gonna start seeing comics like Stranger Things showing up on the Global Comics app. We're also gonna be seeing titles like Hellboy and Umbrella Academy, Black Hammer and Cyberpunk 2077, as well as the Witcher series, all popping up on Global Comics, and it is going to be a sight to behold, because not only are they going to be popping up in their standard print formats, but they're also going to be showing up in their verticals format, which, if you don't know what that is, basically a vertical format is a web comic format, and we've already seen some really awesome titles in vertical format on Global Comics, and they're going to be bringing even more with Dark Horse. Not only that, but Global Comics is going to be releasing free episodes of these verticals on the platform for every title, and you can read these comics anywhere on the go. There's even an offline mode in case you're in a place where you don't have access to Wi-Fi. So don't walk, run to your respective app store on iOS or Android and download the Global Comics app and use my promo code GCXBlerd without fear and get 33% off your first 1-year subscription. Thank you, Global Comics, for sponsoring this video. And with that said, let's get back to the video. So this issue, we get to meet the Outliers. We were introduced to them in the previous issue, but we didn't really know who they are or what's up with them. It was just 4 new characters and a horse just chilling at the end of the issue. It's not a lot to go on. But since that issue, we've learned a little bit more, and in this issue, we get a proper introduction to these 4 characters and a horse, and it's some pretty interesting stuff. Admittedly, if this issue fails anywhere for me, and this is really the only complaint I have about this issue. The only note that I would give Gail about this issue is, and this is no secret, I'm not a fan of the superhero misunderstanding. It is probably one of comic books' most sacred cows that I would be perfectly fine slaughtering with my own bare hands. Superhero misunderstanding, it's a silly trope. It's been in comics for a long time, for decades. Honestly, probably even since the early days of superhero comics. 2 superheroes meet, or multiple superheroes meet, and they can't have a simple conversation. No matter how reasonable these characters normally are, they gotta fight. They gots to scrap. It just is what it is. This doesn't break the rule either. This is leaned into. Now, I will definitely say I'm glad that it doesn't take up the entirety of the issue, but yes, when the Outliers pull up on the Uncanny X-Men, it's a fight. Once the situation is a little bit more diffused, things, I think, actually go in a much better direction. But let's talk about the Outliers, because we already know who these old fogies are here on the Uncanny X-Men. Let's talk about the Outliers. The Outliers are teenagers, to say the least. I don't think any of them is probably older than 15 or 16 years old. Their powers have manifested, and we're going to talk about them in roughly the order that you probably are looking at them right now, as I hold this panel up before me that may or may not be there right now. I don't know. We never know sometimes. First and foremost is going to be Sophia Yonga, aka Jitter, a young girl from Singapore who her power allows her to hyper focus on one, maybe more, but it seems like it is relegated to just one at a time, but she can hyper focus on a specific skill set and become a master of it for at least 1 minute. She can technically use this ability for longer, but there seems to be the downside of her completely crashing due to lack of energy. This is a side effect of her power. Also seems to be how she's always, quotey fingers, jittery, like her body is out of phase, but it's just her body being twitchy, like she's on a sugar rush or something, hence the name Jitter. There's also Valentin Correa, aka Ransom. Ransom does not possess a human heart. Instead, he has a black hole, a singularity where his heart should be. Some might immediately go into the mindset of, oh, it's kind of like Zorn, how like where his head would normally be, there's a singularity, but this is a little bit different just in the sense that his power seems to stem more from the fact he can absorb damage, like anything that would harm him, he seems to be able to absorb harmlessly, like whether it's punches, kicks, strikes from a weapon, or even bullets being shot at him. He can seemingly absorb the impact of those things and use it to strengthen himself, which is very similar in a lot of respects to characters like Bishop or Sebastian Shaw, who can absorb kinetic energy and use it to empower themselves to greater levels than they would be normally. He also seems to get his name Ransom from the fact that he was held for ransom as a child and his parents ultimately abandoned him to his fate. Next up is the character Hotaru, aka Death Dream. Apparently, Hotaru died during childbirth, hence Wolverine's comment during this issue that he smelled of death. This is because Hotaru can choose to be alive or dead at will, and in his death state, he becomes attuned to the spirit world and gains control of spirits and the undead. And it's interesting because his preference is to be dead, hence the name Death Dream. Last, and most certainly not least, is Becca Constance Simon Panay, aka Calico. That's just gonna be her name from now, because I'm not going through all that. She seems to be of the belief she is not a mutant. Okay, hun. No, in all seriousness, the reason why she doesn't believe that she is a mutant is because of her parents. Her parents are of the wealthy elite, and she grew up a very pampered and very overprotected childhood. Her parents hate and fear mutants, and they browbeat their very same hate and fear of mutants into her, hence her denial of being a mutant. She seems to have some very strong mommy issues in this, just when she does actually conjure the mutant power she most certainly does not possess. She does seem to reference her mother on more than one occasion. Her ability is a psychic connection to her horse, Ember, and she can will Ember into transforming to various empowered forms. One that we see in this issue is that of a Pegasus. She's even seemingly able to, on some level, transform herself, while Ember does seem to gain these psionically crafted constructs in the shape of wings and armor and a kind of a flaming aura about her. So too does Calico. She gains armor as if she were some World of Warcraft character, so there is that to take into account as well. That said, the Outliers and the Uncanny X-Men are able to get past their superhero misunderstanding, and the Uncanny X-Men are going to be able to help them out. The new home they have found in Louisiana, what Rogue refers to as Haven, is very likely going to wind up becoming the Anna Marie School for Gifted Rascals, is what this all kind of looks like it's going to be heading towards. Another thing that happens this issue is we get a reference to something that occurred in Jed MacKay's X-Men #3, where we saw Cyclops having a conversation with Rogue over the phone, and we actually get to see Rogue's side of the conversation. And before we knew that, at least from Cyclops' end, that Rogue had encountered the Outliers. This is something we already knew from, that issue that we had already read Uncanny X-Men #1 by this point. But what we didn't know is what information they had given Rogue about, whatever it was that they were running from. We know that they're running from the mysterious hag from the previous issue, though we don't really know why or who sent it. But we learn all that this issue. But ultimately, what this all boils down to is Rogue wants to do a hit and run on Greymalkin Prison, which for those who do not know, Greymalkin Prison is what used to be the Westchester Mansion, the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Now that has been retrofitted into a prison by Warden Dr. Ellis, this is a situation where they know that mutants are being held prisoner. They know this because Jubilee, who makes her appearance this issue, she wasn't in the previous issue, but she does make her appearance here. But it's not to say that we didn't know what she was up to. If you read I believe it was a Free Comic Book Day, I believe it was a Spider-Man X-Men issue. It's usually Spider-Man and X-Men, two separate stories that wind up, kind of converging in one issue. But in that issue, we saw that Jubilee was hanging out outside the Greymalkin Prison and just keeping an eye on everything. This is stuff we already knew. But now we know that she did a little bit more digging. She has come back to Rogue with this information, and now they are going to make an attempt on the prison, or at least that's what Rogue wants to do. Cyclops is trying to talk her out of it. However, this is Rogue we're talking about here, and as we already saw, in that Jed MacKay issue, Cyclops pretty much say, yeah, Rogue's gonna do what she wants to do. And I find it actually funny here because I feel like, there's this kind of like a little bit of a back and forthy, because Rogue makes a mention that, there are no more X-Men, despite the fact she knows Cyclops is running an X-Men team. And it's also funny considering that she says, okay, I guess we're the X-Men now. They're gonna be doing the stuff that X-Men are supposed to do. So it's kind of funny how, and I've talked about this in previous videos. I think I talked about this with, X Factor, how a lot of the teams from in each of their respective books are kind of dunking on one another. There's moments where Cyclops talks smack about Havoc, and then there's books where Phoenix is talking about Cyclops, and there's books where Wolverine, Rogue are both talking shit about Cyclops, but also at the same time Cyclops is talking shit about them. So it's like, yeah, it's one of those things. I kind of love it. Right now, the X-Men are incredibly messy, and I'm here for it. Getting past that part of it, I mentioned that the Outliers were running from something. We saw that very same something in the first issue. It is the Hag. We don't really have a proper name for her outside of her government name that we learned this issue, and it's because of a flashback that has more to do with Charles Xavier. Before Charles Xavier got down rockin' knocking the boots with characters like Moira McTaggart and Empress Lilandra, he met a woman during what appears to be his college days, studying abroad in merry old England. This woman by the name of Sarah, someone who kind of seems to be this very, strong go-getter type, who is painfully aware of the fact that she is a beautiful woman and the fact that she can disarm pretty much any man who she's in the same room with. The point is that when Charles meets her, it's practically love at first sight, and they have a very interesting little meet cute that happens, way cuter than the one that the Uncanny X-Men and the Outliers have with each other. But in this meet cute, we see that Charles is smitten. He falls in love with this woman almost immediately, but the interaction they have with one another and what kind of might tell us why this woman now looks like a very beautiful, gorgeous lass, while in the present day, she looks like Meg Bucklebones from Legend. Sarah makes a passing mention of Charles that everyone around town knows who he is and refers to him as a witch boy, and that they say that he's a pagan. And while he says that he's not, she seems to be already keenly aware of this, but she says that she is. And it's one of those situations too where one could easily make a case for her being very tongue-in-cheek or being sarcastic, but here it seems she's actually telling the truth. She is a witch. Whether or not this is even her actual true form, or whether or not it's something that what we see later in this issue, if that the Hag is something she becomes later, or if she always looked this way or always look that way, we don't know yet, and we will probably have to wait a while before we get a full answer on that. But whatever it is that happened between them, they seemingly had some sort of romantic affair for however long that lasted, and we don't know much more than that. All we know is that Sarah is working with Warden Ellis now, and she is acting as her bounty hunter. She's basically running out and hunting down mutants and bringing them to the Greymalkin prison alongside what are effectively her paladins. It's probably safe to say that she is the character who is tied to that mysterious P symbol that we we saw in X-Men number 700, and maybe even the one who's responsible for Charles's catatonic state also at the end of that issue, though we don't really have full details on that yet. However, we know exactly what her purpose is, and it is to bring mutants to Grey Malkin prison. The reason why she's doing this is very likely tied to that bonus page we saw at the end of Uncanny X-Men number 1. She says that I know who the pillars of your house are, Charles, your House of X, and I'm going to remove them just to see it collapse all around you. Goodbye, Charles. I love you. Something likely happened between the two of them that led to her feeling this way. We don't know what it could have been, but knowing Charles Xavier, he probably got caught on some shaggy shit. You never know with fuckboy Charles Xavier. But getting back to Dr. Ellis, she encounters the character Siren, who we already knew was imprisoned at Grey Malkin. And while Ellis seems to be trying to pitch the idea that Xavier is Quotey Fingers dead, which we know is not really truly actually the case. Yeah, he's in a catatonic state, but I mean, yeah, he's not dead by any stretch of the imagination. Dr. Ellis seems to be trying to warm Siren up to the idea of working alongside her, being one of her trustees, and butter up Siren enough to make her think that, you know, she's gonna have a seat at the table, to make her feel like she's going to be at a place of comfort if she goes along with whatever Ellis tells her or, you know, commands of her. Very similar to the character Philip Scurvy, who is also rumored to be a mutant. Yes, the very same character everyone thought was Charles Xavier during all the previews that were cropping up during the Fall of X era. No, that is a completely separate character that is not Charles Xavier. Just because he's bald and has to walk on crutches doesn't mean it's Charles. But no, she very likely is doing something very similar with Siren that she's doing with him. He's working with her and seemingly in lockstep with Dr. Ellis, always following her around, and maybe this is exactly what she's trying to do with Siren. Like, she doesn't seem to care for mutants, she doesn't seem to like mutants at all, but she definitely finds mutants useful, and mutants who are willing to make themselves useful, she is more than willing to use. So that said, this book is fantastic. Can't wait for the next issue. While you're here, make sure you check out this other video that I got right here. I had a really awesome conversation with Luke Lieberman, who is writing Red Sonja, Death and the Devil, which I believe by the time of the recording this video is actually out right now. Before you head out, make sure you hit that like button. If you're still here, you liked the video. There's no way you didn't. I'm sorry. Either that or you hate watched. Either way, click that like button. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'll catch you all next time. Peace.